Williams on AM 560. The Answer.
Partly cloudy and 69 at O'Hare, 70 at Midway. Your next news update is at 6:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. I got to say, our friend Julie Kelly was on, and she was predicting for a while now, watching this classified docs case, that Judge Eileen Cannon was going to dismiss it after going through the requisite process and giving the prosecution the attempt to make out its case. She did more than that, though. She defenestrated Jack Smith and the special counsel, the appointment of special counsel. Is there a statute in the United States that authorizes the appointment of special counsel Smith to conduct this prosecution? No, there isn't. And she's right. And of course, Clarence Thomas telegraphed this in his concurrence in the immunity case, pointing out that the appointments clause was a reaction of the founders to the experience with the British monarchy. Among the grievances lodged against old King George III was that he, quote, erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Hey, they're doing that now, too. So if Congress wants to create a special counsel and give an attorney general power to appoint him, it can do so, but it hasn't. Former Attorney General Ed Meese, Attorneys General Ed Meese and Michael Mukasey, in an amicus brief, made the argument that the question of Smith is rooted in the appointments clause, and it empowers the president to name officers of the United States to positions established by law and subject them to the advice and consent of the Senate. But Jack Smith was not subjected to the advice and consent of the Senate, as some senators mentioned as well. So that case is dismissed, and the special counsel, at least at this district court level, is no longer. Certainly that will have some precedential value, and good, because I think we're all a little tired of special counsels running amok with the sort of facade of being answerable to Congress while they're operating independent of the Department of Justice, and the attorneys generals just sit there dithering and saying, well, I have to let the investigation go where it's going to go. It's sort of like I can't tell you anything because it's an ongoing investigation cover line. Of course, Joe Biden, noted legal scholar, graduate of the Brent Musburger School of Law at Syracuse. He's not surprised by this because he was conferring with the smartest man he knows, Yale law grad Hunter Biden, baby boy Biden. Not surprised.
I'm not surprised. It comes from the immunity decision the Supreme Court ruled on, and Clarence Thomas, in his dissent, said that independent prosecutors appointed by the Attorney General aren't legit. That's the basis on which this judge moved to dismiss. And but I had an independent prosecutor look at me. They spent months on my going through, and I was totally cooperative. In and out of my house. I don't know, the last time in, there were like 10, 12 agents in my house for 9 hours unaccompanied, going through every single thing I had. That's appropriate. And they looked at me and concluded I didn't do a damn thing wrong. But my generic point is that it's...
I forgot what my generic point is.
The basis upon which the case was thrown out, I find specious, because I don't agree with Clarence Thomas' dissent and or the Supreme Court decision on immunity.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Trump's house was raided and Biden's house was searched. And Trump responded yesterday on Truth Social, and he said this dismissal of the lawless indictment in Florida should be just the first step, followed quickly by the dismissal of all the witch hunts.
Well, that's not going to happen. But it's good that this happened. It's appropriate. And just a point of order, Mr. President.
Yes.
Robert Hur didn't find that you did nothing wrong. He, in fact, intimated just the opposite. I'm not going to prosecute him because he's effectively, he said, he's mentally unfit to stand trial, or he's a congenial old man that means well, and I don't think I could convict him. That's not the same thing as saying he didn't think you did anything wrong. He's saying, I don't think I can secure a conviction for these reasons, which is debatable too. But that's not what Robert Hur said, how Joe Biden characterized it. Of course not, but that's expected at this point. Hans von Spakovsky is a senior legal fellow for the Heritage Foundation, former FEC commissioner, former lawyer for the aforementioned Department of Justice as well, and author of Our Broken Elections, How the Left Changed the Way You Vote. Hans, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks. I'm not sure you need me. You just did a great analysis of that decision by Judge Cannon. I have to say, though, that listening to Biden's supposed analysis of it, if he had written that in an essay in a class I was teaching in law school, I'd have given him an F because he clearly didn't understand or didn't want to understand the basis of the decision, which is on solid constitutional ground.
Well, right. I mean, but this is what the left does, including those that pretend to be legal scholars. I don't like Clarence Thomas. Somebody told me that Eileen Cannon is basing her decision on what Clarence Thomas said in an opinion. So I disagree with Clarence Thomas about that because I disagree with Clarence Thomas about everything just as a matter of principle. That's basically what he's arguing.
Yeah, and that's just totally wrong. What Clarence Thomas said in that Supreme Court decision was that this is an important issue, the constitutionality of special counsels, and that at some point the Supreme Court would have to consider it. That is not what Judge Cannon based her decision on. She wrote a 93-page opinion in which she goes through a detailed analysis of the Constitution, its history, and prior precedent. And what she basically concluded, and I just don't see how you can disagree with it, is that, look, officers of the United States have to be nominated by a president and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And Jack Smith was given as much power as a U.S. attorney. In fact, he was given more power than a U.S. attorney because U.S. attorneys, when they prosecute cases, as you know, for example, in Illinois, their jurisdiction is limited to that state.
Right.
And yet Jack Smith was given the power. He can go anywhere in the country
and Jack
to
Smith,
investigate
and Jack Smith is
prosecute these cases.
Not a U.S. attorney.
Yeah, and he wasn't a U.S. attorney.
Right.
He was a private citizen.
Right.
So he was not nominated by the president. He was not confirmed by the Senate. And that clearly, obviously, violates the Appointments Clause. The only other way he could have been appointed to do this was if he's considered what they call an inferior officer of the U.S., and Congress passed a statute specifically giving the Attorney General the ability to appoint him, and there's no such statute.
Well, I just want to be clear, though. You seem to be suggesting that maybe Biden didn't read that 93-page opinion of Judge Eileen Cannon, and you know how probing and exacting he is. So,
right.
Yeah, I just want to put that on the record. Okay, very good. The SAFE Act that was leveled up by the House last week to require identification to vote in federal elections. So to prevent people in this country illegally from voting in federal elections. Only 5 Democrats managed to bring themselves to support this legislation. 5 Democrats in the House, which passed the House, but is obviously not going anywhere under Chuck Schumer. But one of the arguments you hear from the left that I want you to address, since this is an area of expertise, is, Hans, we don't need this. This is redundant. This is a show vote. It is already against federal law to vote in federal elections if you're in this country legally.
Well, if something being against the law prevented people from doing it I guess our prisons are empty, right? You don't have anybody in any of the jails or prisons in Illinois, do you?
No, but I mean, but the argument, this law is a redundancy.
No, that's really, how is it when we have an honor system for registering to vote? Everybody knows this. You fill out a one-page form, you sign it, and you send it in. It's an honor system. And on it, you say whether or not you are a U.S. citizen. How are states supposed to check? Who are they supposed to check with to somehow verify that you are, in fact, a U.S. citizen? There is no such system in place. So the Democrats saying, oh, this is redundant, that's a lie. In fact, the only database around that is a partial answer to this, of course, is the database of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, right? I mean, they have a database of aliens who are in this country legally. They also have in their database aliens who are here illegally who at some point were caught and detained. What's not in their database are all the gotaways, right? All the aliens who managed to come in were never caught. But DHS has for years put up red tape to prevent state officials, election officials, from being able to access their database. And even if they could, it's not going to find illegals who aren't in the database. So the only way to do anything about this is to require proof of citizenship when you register to vote, just like 2/3 of the states now require you to show an ID when you go vote.
Yeah, but there's some places like here in Illinois, if you go to get your driver's license, they try and sign you up to vote at the same time. So there's really no vetting taking place at all. And what is the Heritage Foundation or the Republican Party doing to fight this?
We have been working with state legislators and others who want to do something about this. The worst states in the country for this are, unfortunately, places like Illinois and California that have put in automatic voter registration. So they don't even ask you anymore when you go in for a driver's license whether or not you want to register to vote. They just automatically register you, and you have to tell them, oh, no, I'm not eligible. You shouldn't register me. And there's been incident after incident of it being discovered that places like California, for example, are registering people who aren't U.S. citizens.
Actually, I wanted to just share an anecdote just to make this real. And so I went to your database, the Heritage Foundation's voter fraud database, and Illinois, just one case, 2017, the case of Miguel Valencia Sandoval. Miguel Valencia Sandoval, an illegal immigrant from Mexico, admitted he paid $50,000 in March of 2005 for the birth certificate of a Texas man, Ramiro Guerrero Vasquez. Using the stolen identity, he resided in Champaign County, Illinois for the past 11 years. His false identity was discovered when he applied for a U.S. passport in 2012 and made a false statement of U.S. citizenship on the passport application. Further investigation revealed he similarly made a false claim of citizenship on a voter registration application and voted in elections in Champaign County in 2012, 2014, 2016. He pleaded guilty to 5 counts, 4 of which related to voting while not a citizen, spent a year in jail, and following his apprehension for trying to illegally re-enter the United States, of course he did, sentenced to time served in January of 2018 and was scheduled to be deported back to Mexico at that time. I'm sure he's back in Champaign County now this is 6 years removed. And again, this is one case. There are many. This is one case. But this is the sort of thing that is real and that is happening. And this is why you always have the left referring to no evidence of systemic. You got to have systemic voter fraud. Oh, there's voter fraud.
Right.
It just hasn't risen to the level of what we define as systemic, because until you can show me thousands of Miguel Valencia Sandovals, the happening in real time, then I'm just going to stick with this idea that our elections are mainly free and fair.
Well, yeah, and look, even when you show them those larger numbers, they just ignore them and deny them. A quick example of that is Virginia recently released a report saying that since 2014, they've removed 11,000 aliens from the voter rolls.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a small number, especially in a state that has had 2 statewide attorney general races decided by less than 1,000 votes. That report was virtually ignored in the media. And when I mentioned that in a congressional hearing about 3 months ago, the Democratic members of it just ignored it.
What's your assessment? You know, one of the issues that has been raised by members of Congress, Republican members of Congress on the Hill, is this interaction of federal agencies with all of the people that have been invited into this country under this president, you know, on the order of, 8, 10, 12 million, who knows? And do you have any sense of what information we're going to get or are going to be able to get as it pertains to, is DHS, you know, one of the frontline agencies with personnel is dealing hand to hand with people entering this country illegally at their behest, at the government's behest, of course. But any idea about what those interactions are, what the vulnerabilities are? Are there organized efforts afoot that are discernible to have illegals vote in this presidential election?
The Heritage Foundation formed what we call our oversight team. And they after getting some information, they sent an undercover video team down into Mexico, into a camp organized by one of those NGO nonprofits that helps aliens illegally cross the border. And what did they find there? They found posters up everywhere in this camp in Spanish telling individuals that as soon as they get across the border, they should register to vote and vote for Joe Biden. The undercover video is out. We released it. People can find it. And that's the kind of thing that is going on all along the border.
And I mean, what is your assessment of the Republican Party response, whether on the Hill or at the RNC, the Trump campaign? I mean, is there a counter to this that is afoot?
Well, the SAVE Act was supposed to be the counter to it. At least they got it through the House. As you were correct in saying, there's no way Schumer is going to let it out that way. State officials in some red states are trying to do something about it by stepping up, for example, what they're doing at their DMVs to try to find individuals who are not aliens, but they're handicapped. They're handicapped by not being able to ask for proof of citizenship and not being able to access Department of Homeland Security's database.
Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow for Heritage Foundation, former FEC Commissioner and lawyer for the Department of Justice, author of Our Broken Elections, How the Left Changed the Way You Vote. Thanks as always, Hans. Appreciate it.
Sir, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
The doctor's office that mixed up your files?